Vandera 5 was not a peaceful world. It was dry, windy, and full of strange violet storms that rolled across the desert every evening. The humans who lived there often joked that the planet hated them, but they stayed anyway because it was home. Among them was Ethan Cole, a quiet engineer who had chosen a simple life far from the crowded cities of Earth. His small cabin stood on the edge of the colony's border zone, surrounded by endless dunes and pale rock. He worked alone, repairing power grids and sending reports to the central hub. It was a quiet job, and maybe too quiet sometimes. The only sign of life he saw each week was the arrival of the Terriven courier, a tall alien female who delivered mail between the colonies. Her name was Lyra. She was unlike anyone Ethan had ever met, slender but strong, with light blue skin that shimmered faintly under the suns. Her eyes were golden, like sunlight reflected on metal. Two fox-like ears twitched gently whenever she listened, and a faint silvery glow followed her movements. She always wore her courier jacket buttoned to the throat, and her voice was calm and musical. For 6 months, their meetings were brief. Lyra would walk up to his door, hand over the mail with a polite nod, and then disappear into the sand like a shadow. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her words were measured, almost ceremonial. "Delivery for Engineer Cole. Have a peaceful cycle," she would say, bowing slightly before leaving. Ethan didn't mind her quiet nature. In fact, he liked it. On Vandera 5, most people were too loud, always complaining about the storms, the heat, or the rationed water. Lyra was different, disciplined, gentle, and professional. He respected that. But one morning, when the wind was still and the sun had just climbed over the dunes, something changed. Ethan was working on a power relay when he saw Lyra's mailcraft land nearby. Normally she moved with perfect grace, but this time she stumbled slightly as she stepped out. Her wings, now faint transparent folds that usually stayed tucked against her back, flickered unsteadily. Her breathing seemed uneven. He waved. "Morning, Lyra," no answer. She hesitated near the door, clutching the small parcel tightly to her chest. Her eyes glowed brighter than usual, and there was a strange tension in her expression. "You okay?" Ethan asked, frowning. Lyra looked up at him as if startled. For a second she met his eyes and then quickly turned away. "I cannot." "Not now," she muttered, voice trembling. Without another word, she dropped the package and rushed back to her craft, disappearing in a flash of dust. Ethan stood there, confused. That was not like her at all. She had never broken protocol. He picked up the package, wanted a simple delivery of colony parts, but couldn't shake the image of her frightened face. That night, he couldn't sleep. The wind outside howled, and his sensors kept pinging movement near the cabin. At first, he thought it was just the sand shifting, but when he checked the screen, he saw a large footprint circling his porch, light but precise. "Driven footprints, Lyra," he whispered to himself. The next morning, he called the colony center. "Hey, you guys have any news from the courier station? My regular delivery agent acted strange yesterday." The operator sounded tired. "Yeah, we got reports. The Driven species are entering some kind of seasonal phase. Mood shifts, energy spikes. Nothing dangerous, but unpredictable." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Seasonal phase?" Yeah. You know, like emotional cycles. Their biology's different. Don't take anything personally. It'll pass in a few days." Ethan thanked him and ended the call, but the explanation only made him more curious. He tried searching through the database, but most Terriven records were private. The few open entries mentioned something about instinctive resonance and bond sensitivity. It didn't make much sense to him. But one thing was clear. Lyra was going through something intense. He hoped she was okay. The next week, when her craft appeared again, Ethan was ready. He stood outside waiting with a calm smile. But when Lyra stepped out, he could see she was struggling. Her hands trembled as she held out the delivery tablet, and her ears twitched like she was fighting to stay in control. "Lyra," he said gently, "you look tired. You want to sit for a minute? I've got cold water inside." Her eyes widened and she almost dropped the parcel. "No, I must not. Humans do not understand. Please forgive any disorder." Ethan frowned. "Disorder? You mean whatever's happening to you? Look, I don't care about rules right now. You're shaking. You need rest." Her golden eyes met his again, and this time she didn't look away. "You are kind," she whispered softly, "but my body reacts when near others. It is difficult to hide. The storm inside grows stronger." She pressed her hands together like she was trying to hold herself steady. Then, almost in shame, she stepped back. Forgive me. My duty comes first. My kind call it the cycle. It will end soon. Ethan didn't stop her as she left, but he noticed her tail, usually tucked neatly under her jacket, twitching rapidly as she climbed into her craft. When she flew away, he stood there for a long time, feeling strangely helpless. That evening, the colony's sky turned red as the twin suns set. A heavy storm approached from the east. The air buzzed with static energy, making every piece of metal hum. Ethan was sealing his windows when he heard a noise outside. A soft thump, followed by a faint cry. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped onto the porch. There she was, Lyra, soaked in violet dust, wings folded tight, crouching near his power converter. She looked exhausted. Her courier badge cracked and her eyes glowed faintly through the haze. Lyra. Ethan rushed forward. What happened? She tried to stand but stumbled. Storm cut. Navigation. I tried to return to base. But my head... She winced and pressed her hand to her temple. The cycle reacts to radiation. I cannot control. Feelings. He helped her inside, guiding her toward the small rest area. She tried to resist. I should not enter a human home, she said weakly. Then consider it an emergency shelter, Ethan replied firmly. You'll freeze out there. He fetched a thermal blanket and some water. She drank slowly, her trembling easing slightly. The storm outside rattled the walls, throwing flashes of light across her face. For the first time, Ethan saw how fragile she looked. Not as a courier, not as an alien, but as a living being fighting something she couldn't explain. Do your people get help during this cycle? He asked softly. She shook her head. It is private. We are expected to isolate until it passes, but storms make the mind unstable. I should not be near anyone. Ethan smiled faintly. Well, you already are. And I'm not complaining. For a moment, she looked surprised, then let out a small sound, almost like laughter. You are strange, human. Yeah, he said. I get that a lot. They sat quietly as thunder rolled across the desert. Lyra's breathing slowed. Her glowing eyes dimmed and she finally seemed calm. Your presence, she said suddenly. It helps. The air feels steady here. Ethan shrugged. Maybe it's just my boring human scent, but Lyra shook her head. No, it is your calm. Terriven sense emotional waves. Yours are balanced, gentle. That balance anchors me. Her words made him pause. He had never thought of emotions as something that could affect another being's biology. But looking at her now, it made sense. After a while, she leaned back against the wall and whispered, When I return, I will remember this kindness. I promise, he nodded. Just get through your storm first. The storm outside lasted through the night. The wind howled like an animal, and lightning danced across the horizon. Inside, the air hummed softly with the sound of her slow breathing. Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept glancing at her, making sure she was okay. She looked peaceful now, her ears twitching slightly as if she were dreaming. By morning, the sky was clear again. Lyra stood by the window looking out at the dunes. Her uniform was still dusty, but her eyes had softened. The cycle still runs, she said quietly. But the chaos inside is less. She turned to him and bowed slightly. Your scent keeps me calm. You do not understand what that means, but thank you. Ethan smiled gently. You don't need to thank me. Just promise me you'll be careful out there. She hesitated. I will try. Then she stepped outside, wings unfolding under the pale sunlight. Before leaving, she looked back once more. Not many humans would open their doors for a Terriven in this state. You're different, Ethan shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I just believe no one should face a storm alone. For a heartbeat, something flickered in her eyes. Something between gratitude and something deeper. Then she took off, her craft rising into the violet sky, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. Ethan watched until she disappeared beyond the dunes. When he returned inside, he noticed the unopened parcel still on the table. He finally opened it and found inside a small metal charm shaped like a wing. Not part of the delivery manifest. No message. Just the charm. He smiled faintly, realizing it must have fallen from her pocket. Or maybe he thought it was her way of saying thank you. That night, as the twin moons rose, Ethan stood on his porch again. The desert was quiet, but in the distance, faint blue light shimmered where her ship had flown. He didn't know what the next delivery would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. The universe was big, strange, and full of things humans didn't understand. But sometimes, in the middle of all that mystery, a single act of kindness could bridge the stars. 3 weeks had passed since the storm night. The desert had calmed, but Ethan Cole felt more restless than ever. His days followed the same routine, fixing the relay panels, checking the solar arrays, and sending his reports to the central hub. Yet something felt missing. Every morning he would step outside, scanning the horizon for that familiar shimmer in the sky, Lyra's mailcraft slicing through the violet clouds. But nothing appeared. The quiet emptiness made him realize how used he had become to her weekly visits, her quiet presence, her polite tone. He told himself not to worry. The colony officials had probably suspended courier routes due to solar flares or weather instability. Still, a small part of him wondered if she had been reassigned. Or worse, if the cycle she spoke of had forced her back home permanently. One evening, while he was repairing a water line, his console beeped. A message appeared, encrypted, labeled Private Delivery Priority. The sender tag was blank. He frowned and tapped the screen. Final delivery pending and recipient Ethan Cole. Location Northern Ridge, Sector D17. Time twilight. Sender requests in-person pickup only. Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Twilight? That was only an hour away. And the coordinates pointed to a ridge nearly 15 kilometers from his cabin. He didn't have to guess who had sent it. He packed some supplies, hopped on his sand glider, and rode out into the desert as the suns dipped below the horizon. The air shimmered orange and gold, and the winds carried soft humming sounds, echoes of the Trivan flight engines. When he reached the ridge, he saw a small campfire burning faintly near a cluster of rocks, and beside it, her. Lyra stood with her back to him, wings folded tight, her courier jacket torn at one sleeve. Her golden eyes reflected the firelight as she turned. She looked weaker than before, her glow dimmed, but her smile was genuine. "You came," she said softly. Ethan climbed off his glider. "Of course I did. You said it was a delivery, right? Wouldn't want to keep a courier waiting." Lyra's ears twitched slightly in amusement. "It is indeed a delivery, but not one you can sign for." She motioned for him to sit by the fire. He did. The night was cool and the stars shone like a river above them. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two people standing at the edge of something important, unsure what came next. Finally, she said, "This is my last route. After tonight, I return to my homeworld." Ethan looked at her in surprise. "You're leaving Vandera 5? "Yes, the council called all couriers back. The radiation levels during this cycle are too dangerous. And," she paused, lowering her gaze, "the cycle inside me ends tonight. When it does, the emotional surge fades. Memories of it become faint." He frowned. "You mean you'll forget what happened here?" "Not forget entirely," she said, "but it will feel distant, like a dream. The Terrivan mind protects itself. Feelings born during the cycle can overwhelm us. We let them fade to keep our balance." Ethan stared into the fire, unsure how to respond. The thought of her forgetting their quiet night in the storm, her trust, her laughter, and left a hollow ache in his chest. "So this delivery," he said finally, forcing a smile, "is your goodbye." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, but I did not wish to leave without completing one last task." She reached into her pack and pulled out a small sealed container. Inside was a crystalline badge, glowing faintly blue. "For you," she said. "An identification pass. It allows safe passage into Riven territory should you ever travel beyond this world." Ethan took it carefully. "That's quite a gift." Her smile was faint. "You offered shelter when I was at my weakest. You treated me not as a courier, but as a person. In Terrivan culture, that is a bond stronger than rank. It must be honored." He looked at the badge again. "You didn't have to." "I did," she interrupted gently. "It is my way." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain. For a long while they sat in silence, watching the fire flicker. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "Lyra, before you go, I want to understand something. You said the cycle causes feelings that fade. But are they fake? Just instincts?" She hesitated. "They are real while they last. The emotions are not false, only heightened. During the cycle, a Trivan senses resonance, energy between minds. It draws us toward certain beings whose presence brings peace. That peace is rare for me. It was you. Ethan's heart tightened. So your instincts pulled you toward me because I was calm? Yes, she whispered. Your calmness silenced the storm inside. Most Terriven find resonance among their own kind. I never expected to find it with a human. He looked away, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. And after tonight, that feeling disappears? She nodded. For me, perhaps. But for you, I cannot say. Ethan gave a small smile. That's the tricky thing about humans. We tend to remember the things that change us, even if they weren't meant to last. Her golden eyes softened. You speak with such quiet sadness, Ethan Cole. He chuckled lightly. Maybe it's because I've spent too many nights talking to desert winds. The fire crackled between them. Above, the twin moons of Vandera 5 rose together, bathing the ridge in pale silver light. The scene felt unreal, like a dream suspended between two worlds. Lyra stood slowly, walking to the edge of the cliff. The wind tugged at her jacket and her wings unfolded halfway, catching the moonlight. When I return home, she said softly, I will be rebalanced. My mind will clear. But before that happens, I wish to remember this moment. Ethan joined her, standing beside her as the wind whipped across the ridge. Then remember it as a good one, he said. She turned toward him. Humans speak of friendship, yes? A bond without obligation? He nodded. That's right. It means you care without expecting anything back. Then that is what I wish to call this, friendship. Ethan smiled. I'd like that. A silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, warmth, and the strange comfort that sometimes comes when two very different beings realize they aren't so different after all. After a while, Lyra took a deep breath. My ship will arrive soon. I will leave before dawn. Ethan nodded slowly. Do you want me to walk you back? No, I must go alone. Her voice was quiet but firm. Then she looked at him again, her expression uncertain. May I ask something strange? Go ahead. Would you hold my hand? He hesitated only a second, then reached out. Her fingers were cool and smooth, her skin faintly glowing. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind roared, the fire burned low, and the universe felt vast around them. Yet their joined hands made it seem smaller. Lyra closed her eyes. The Terriven call this the echo moment, when two energies touch and create memory. It may fade, but for an instant it is perfect. He smiled gently. Then let's make it count. They stood like that for several minutes until the faint hum of engines echoed in the distance. A silver craft approached, descending through the haze. Lyra let go of his hand slowly. It is time, she said quietly. Ethan stepped back, not trusting himself to speak. She looked at him one last time, her expression soft but unreadable. Then she spread her wings and rose into the air, landing lightly at the edge of the ship's ramp. Before entering, she turned and said, The universe is vast, Ethan Cole. But if the winds ever bring you to Terriven skies, listen for the echo. It may answer. Then she was gone. The craft lifted, rising higher and higher until it became a tiny point of light in the violet sky. Ethan stood there long after it disappeared, the desert wind brushing against his jacket. In his hand he still held the crystalline badge, glowing faintly blue. He didn't move for a while. The stars were brighter that night, as if the world itself wanted to stay awake a little longer. When he finally rode back to his cabin, the silence felt different. It wasn't lonely, and it was full of memory. Days turned into weeks. Lyra did not return. The new courier assigned to his route was mechanical, a small drone that beeped politely but said nothing. It made the world feel emptier somehow. Ethan continued his work, but he often found himself gazing at the sky. Sometimes at night he thought he heard a faint humming sound carried by the wind, like the soft resonance of wings. Then one morning a new package arrived. Not through the normal network. It came directly from orbit, sealed in a crystal casing. No sender listed. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single note written in both human English and Terriven script. Echo received. Calm restored. Until next season, human. Below the message was a small crystal pendant, the same shape as the charm she had once left behind. But this one glowed brighter, pulsing faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. Ethan stared at it for a long time, smiling slowly. He placed the crystal on his work table, next to his coffee mug. Outside, the sun rose over the dunes, painting the desert gold. He stepped out onto his porch, breathing in the dry morning air. The wind whispered softly, a sound almost like her voice. He spoke quietly, to no one in particular. "Safe travels, Lyra," and in that moment, he thought he heard a faint reply, carried across the dunes, a whisper so soft it could have been the wind. "Until next season." Ethan smiled again. The twin suns climbed higher, bathing the horizon in light, and though Vandera 5 was still dry and empty, it no longer felt lifeless. Somewhere out there, across the stars, a Terrivan courier remembered a human who had opened his door during a storm, and that small act of kindness had become an echo strong enough to cross the galaxies.